and good morning. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you here. We'd like to start with a discussion today that looks back at the last decade and also looks at what is next. Joining me are Samir Valiyev, the Deputy Minister of Energy for the Republic of Azerbaijan. Welcome. Sarah Owasin, Spain's Secretary of State for Energy, and Rana Adib, the Executive Director of REN 21. Yes, let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thanks so much for joining me today. Now, in this high-level panel, we would like to take a look back at what we've collectively achieved over the last 10 years and also look ahead at what we still have to do as we explore the question of how the energy transition can be further accelerated. To do that, first, I'd like to take a moment. Audience, I think you may have participated in the Slido panel that was here on the screens. Now I'd like to do one specifically for this panel here in the Europazaal. So go ahead, get out your phones, scan that there. You have to then choose Europazaal, and I'll read the question that you'll see there. And panelists, I'd like you to listen too. We'll talk about this, of course, during our panel. As we approach 2030, what do we need to prioritize to make the energy transition happen? So right now, use your phone, enter a word or two, and in just a little bit, we'll take a look at the results on the screen. And while our audience answers that question, panelists, I'd like to get started. I'd like to do so with a round of targeted questions, and I'll ask you to keep your answers to 3 minutes each. Samir Valiyev, the Republic of Azerbaijan has tremendous wind and solar energy potential. Can you give us a quick recap of where you stood 10 years ago and what your goals in the next decade will be? And I'm sure you're eager to talk, of course, about the next COP in Azerbaijan in November. But for now, can you perhaps more generally discuss your goals in the next decade?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to underlines that although Azerbaijan is historically known as an oil and gas producer country in the world, currently we participate in the process of the transition of green energy, and the year of 2024 has been announced as a year of solidarity for the green world in Azerbaijan. In 2022, the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan has approved economic and social strategy until 2026, according which one of the 5 priorities is a country of clean environment and green growth. Now we have targets to reach 20% of share of renewable energies in the installed capacity of electricity, and according to our estimation, we fulfill our targets. Regarding COP29, first of all, I would like to say that the decision to hold COP29 in Azerbaijan with the unanimous position of the international community, we accept as manifestation of trust and respect for our country. The decision to hold COP29 in Azerbaijan was reached in the context of advancing the regional peace agenda. Chairing this event is both an honor and a great commitment and responsibility. Azerbaijan is taking all the necessary steps from the point of view of both the organization and essence of the event. Azerbaijan's chairmanship of COP29 reflects its commitment to green energy, climate agenda, and decarbonization plans. We will successfully lead international efforts to accelerate the development of green energy and protect ecological balance. Regarding the issues to be raised during the COP29, we think that finance is a crucial factor in the fight against climate change, and according to reports, 2.4 trillion is needed, US dollars, is needed annually to invest in renewable energy and climate-related issues in developing countries. Achieving the 2030 and 2050 climate targets requires enormous efforts, and a new collective quantitative goal for climate finance must be agreed. Private capital must be mobilized to this process, and countries must ensure that they can quickly access sufficient concessional support. We hope that COP29 will be the platform where climate plans turn into investment opportunities. For this, Azerbaijan will duly fulfill its mission to achieve progress on climate financing.
Thank you very much, Samir Valiyev. We might have a chance to talk a little bit more about COP29 if you'd like to, but for now, I'd like to go to Sara Oesen. Thanks to its energy and climate change policies, Spain is today at the forefront of the energy transition in Europe. We were looking, Spain built the first solar installation exactly 40 years ago. 40 years ago, and the first wind farm 30 years ago. Today, Spain has really ambitious decarbonization targets, and it looks like you'll achieve electricity sector targets much earlier than planned. What policies led to this success?
Good morning, and thank you, Jennifer, for this specific question. For me, first, it's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues from Azerbaijan. Congratulations for hosting the COP29, and also to Rana. Happy anniversary, 20 years for RAN 21. So I think it's a great experience. Talking about Spanish experience in energy transition, I think it's very important that we try to use a word that is difficult in this time, but is anticipation. That means that I think it's crucial that we work in a planning, in a framework where we set objectives in the short, medium, and long run. That is part of the success story. So once we start in the government in 2018, we were very, very engaged in making a public debate about what kind of goals we can achieve and what are the impacts for the civil society. So putting the people in the center is also part of the success story of the Spanish in the energy transition. So we have been working in setting objectives. As I mentioned, we have this framework, and among this framework, we also have this National Climate and Action Energy Plan, where we fix what kind of objectives we can have for 2030 and how we can make this happen in the solar and wind sets in renewables. But also we think about how we need to make this transformation happen from the side, demand side, not just supply, also demand. So we work with the industry, we work with financial institutions, we work with civil society, as I mentioned. So we have a plan, and we also, with clear policies that provide new investments in Spain. That's important. Once you have the regulatory framework, it's a good enabler for new investment coming, and that is happening. And that is happening, and 10 years ago, Spain was out of a list of the top rank countries, and we are now the second one in investment in the world for renewables. We are the ones that are having lots of projects around green hydrogen, and that's because we have, obviously, you have the policy, we have the talent, the companies, we have also the file. I mean, we have resources, we have solar. Our capacity is doubling the one that in the north of Europe we can see. And if I may share two very important success stories that I think they are very important, is the one with rooftops in Spain. Back in 2018, what we have is less than 500 megawatts installed capacity of self-consumption of rooftops. Now what we can see is in 5 years' time, the increase of that energy in Spain increased more than 1,300%. So it's completely a figure that I never imagined we can have in our country, but we have it, and we have it because we avoid these artificial barriers to that kind of implementation, and we put in place financing and helping consumers, households, and industries to really think that this is possible. And something very important is that we have this energy crisis. And this energy crisis provide new information for all of us, consumers and industries. And they think about energy is something that they need to think about. And they can be part of this, the action plan. They can be part of the energy system. They can produce the energy, they can share the energy, and that's a very success story. Another one that I would like to share with you is the one in green hydrogen. So in 2020, we make a call for interest, trying to see how many projects around green hydrogen we can have in our country. So we make an open call, and we have 28 projects presented. Then, that year, in November, we approved our roadmap for green hydrogen, with measures, with objectives, with concrete measures also around innovation. And what we have is like we consider we can make another call for interest. So 6 months between the first one and the second one, we receive more than 500 projects in our country. And last year in December, more than 600 projects. So I think once you have a framework and you enabling the environments with not just policies, but also with, we have next generation, which I think it's very important. We have our plan in the recovery, where we also, as a government, want to be concentrated in the energy transition as a key pillar. Things happen. So in Spain, I think it's a success story we want to share with all of you. Obviously, we also have failures that I think are also important to share with other ones in order to avoid that other ones fail once again. We need to be quicker, faster, we need investment and scale up, but all those things can happen once you put a good policy and once you have participation of a civil society. Again, citizens in the center of the transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah Owace. And it sounds like a few of the things we might touch on in our second round of questions about things we still have to do in priorities. Rana Adi, we'll go to you next. As your co-panelist already said, congratulations, REN 21 is celebrating 2 decades. That's fantastic. And as an organization, you have now 20 years of multi-stakeholder mobilization under your belt, years of observations on how the discourse around renewable energies has changed and evolved over the years. And what I'd like to see from your perspective, how do you see the impact of discussions that have been going on for this time, shaping global energy policies today?
Thank you so much. Yes, I think we have already heard some really interesting stories, and I am very happy that we're sharing this panel, Sarah, because last year we actually hosted together the Spanish International Renewable Energy Conference in Spain, because Spain is so cutting edge, I think, and is telling us a story on how we need to make also the energy discourse evolve. I think one part is very clearly, when we're looking back, is, and we see it very often, we default back when we speak about the energy transition to speak about electricity only. Mm-hmm. This is something which is actually one of the big bottlenecks, because we're basically, what do we do by doing this? We're ignoring 80% of our total final energy consumption. So I think this is what has happened in the past, and because there was this attention, we also have the success stories in renewable electricity with solar photovoltaics and wind upcoming, because there are 180 countries that have a renewable electricity policy. But when we are looking at transport, for instance, 30% of the energy demand, there's only 70 countries. And when we are looking at heating and cooling, which is 50% of the energy demand, only 24 countries. And I think this is already indicating how we're today very successful in solar PV and wind, and in power market. We see electrification uptaking, obviously, from heating and cooling with heat pumps and electricity. But we also need to acknowledge that 80% is actually not electricity, and here it is important to replicate what the success story in power means for all energy. So I think this is one part. What also means as a learning curve, I think, is policy and regulations, as you said, and energy planning is fundamental. If it's not there, we won't get there, because the market, unfortunately, today is still not a level playing field. That's a reality. You need to have the right market conditions to be able to develop renewable energy, to attract investment, to give basically also the security for the private sector, for the investors, the renewable energy sector, but also the energy consuming sector to engage. And I think this is showing another indication, and we see it. It has been accelerated during the last years with supply interruptions during COVID, with the energy crisis. A pillar of the energy transition needs to be the economic and industrial pillar of our societies. And I think this is one of the things we see. In the past, we had like those energy bubbles, I guess, talking, very nerdy discussions and very interesting discussions. But the reality is it needs to go beyond this. And the third part, and I'm building on what you're saying, Sarah, very much, it's not going to happen without the citizens. Now, in Germany, I think there were some pain moments during the last month on not being able to push basically some of the ambitious transition, but this is a reality we experience and we observe globally. And there are two aspects to it. So we see what needs to happen if we want to accelerate. It's massive investment into renewables, tripling the renewable electricity capacities. And when we're saying tripling until 2030, we're trying to do in 5 years' time what we did during the last 15 years, you see, from a high level. So this means investment in the industry, it means building up the capacities, etc. It also means accelerating permitting. And the reality is that globally we have 3,000 gigawatt of capacity that are basically there, but not connected because of permitting issues or because the grids are not there. And this is another part which is showing showing two things. One is, it's not about the capacity part only, it's also about infrastructure and the demand sectors. And the second part is permitting needs to be accelerated. And I think here we really need to learn from countries like Spain. If you speak about permitting, it seems like, okay, as an industry, we want to push it out. But the reality is, if you want to accelerate permitting, you also need to take into account society. Because this is a big reality of renewable energy. Renewables is everywhere, it's decentralized, and it is closer to our houses and to our cities and to agriculture and to the land. And this requires that citizens need to be part of the discussion. So we need to change our discourse from a permitting discourse to over a societal acceptance, to societal support, to a citizens' engagement discourse. And this actually requires more time. It needs to be taken into account in planning. But I think if you do it well, you can really see that if you bring those players around the table from the beginning on, and it's about having a seat at the table and inclusiveness, then it will be smoother. And I think this also requires, to come back to your question, we need to change our discourse. Actually, it is not. Many citizens are not going to think about the energy. Even many energy consumers will not think about energy. They'll think about cost, they'll think about supply and energy security, security of supply. They might think about local production, because that's also something which is valued today. We have seen like sustainability labels and sustainability coming to the forefront of finance investment, but also customer decisions. And these are actually really things which we need to take into account when we speak about it. So I guess it is also saying like energy is an economic benefit, and we have seen it. So I find it amazing. Last year I learned like in Spain, it's commercial banks basically giving commercial credits to the citizens to buy rooftop solar or solar thermal. And these are things that need to be engaged and empowered by the market conditions, that will allow to bring basically the commercial financial sector, that will allow to bring the industry, but that also allow to bring basically the citizens on board. One last comment, just because I think it's a really interesting story. It is also about reinventing business models. And here there are some really good examples in countries where you do not yet have the right policy and regulatory framework. There are still good ways of approaching it. So bridging, for instance, renewable energy sectors with the housing part allows to tap into normal financial flows, standard financial flows, which are housing loans. And there are some companies that are basically using this as an argument, say like, you invest in a house, you will include basically your energy into this, and after 10 years, you don't pay anything anymore for your energy supply. And I think this is something which any citizens can understand and will just be part of the normal life. So it's about standardizing the transition.
Thank you so much, Rana Adib. I love that you bring this up. My dad has done this. He lives in Wisconsin in the United States, and this was a huge incentive for him. I love that you've touched upon so many different topics. I want to come back to an important one in our second round of questions, but you talked about making sure that people are with us and what the people think. And right now, I want to find out what you all in the room here think. I'd like to bring up the response to our Slido question, which was, as a reminder, as we approach 2030, what do we need to prioritize to make the energy transition happen? We aren't appearing live right now, so all of you in the room, as soon as we can bring those results up, we'll go ahead and see what those are. And panelists, I'll ask you then to take a moment as well. Let's just look what we have. Obviously with Slido, the larger the word, the more people have mentioned it. So we have finance, financing, renewable energy, stop talking, start acting, social fairness, a just transition, prioritization, support democratic values, realism and pragmatism, no more support for fossil fuels, grid infrastructure. You brought this up as well, Rana. We'll have a panel on grid infrastructure a little bit later here in the Oil Bazaar. Skilled workforce and people. Rana, I'd like to come back to you. We just have about 6 minutes left in this abbreviated panel today, but you talk about participation of people, and I want to come back specifically to you because one of the things that you've worked really hard on in terms of people and skill shortages is also inclusion, specifically of women in the energy transition. I wonder if you can speak about this important role that women will play in the next 10 years.
I can, but I would like to speak about inclusion in a more broad way. I think I will come to the gender component, obviously, as part of this. But I think when we speak about inclusion, especially, and I think it's important to bring this reality here into the discussion too. When we speak about inclusion, we're still speaking about the developing countries receiving far less investment globally. And I think this is something that needs to be on the forefront when we speak about the energy transition. It is fundamental because basically the inclusion here needs to be reflected in our policy regulatory frameworks, in trade and economy, etc. And what we realize is when we address energy access and energy for economic development in developing countries too, we're actually serving women in society there. And I think when we speak about gender and inclusion of women in the energy debate, I'm always very tempted to say, like, let's stop speaking about women in the energy debate only. We need to speak about, and I'm saying this as a woman in a leadership role, I guess, as a head of an organization, let's speak about women being at the table to discuss where our economies are heading, where our societies are heading. It's not only about energy. And here the reality is, and I think we had a really good example in the lead up to COP29 actually, where there has been a mobilization of women saying like, in the council women are not well represented. And I would like to thank the government of Azerbaijan actually to really adapt to this call for inclusion. I think this is really a part. I would like us to think about a great hashtag, like a Me Too hashtag, is women at the table. I think this is something which would really be interesting and where we need to have a mobilization. Why? Because it's 50% of the population. And if we don't have a seat at the table, their realities are not taken into account. As if we don't have a seat at the table from developing countries, their realities won't be taken into account. And I think this is basically a part on the inclusion, is always think about what players need to be here at the table to be able to be successful to drive the transition. And I think it's really important to see that if they are not here, we take a risk that in 5 years' time we look back and we have failed. And we can't afford this because this means that humankind is going into the wall. So I guess I take this a bit broader, but it's about a broader inclusion, but tap into the potential of so many great people here on the planet, right? 50%.
Thank you so much, Rana Adib. For some final thoughts, we just have a couple minutes left in this session. Sarah Oasen, briefly, can you summarize in just a minute what Spain needs to prioritize up to 2030 and then in the 10 years after that?
Well, I think it's Spain as Europe is a war. I think we need to prioritize how implementation. I think one message that you have that there from the audience about do not talk and action. I think we need action and we need to talk. Both things are very important. This dialogue is very important. So I think we can share the experience, but once again, continue with ambition, putting our policies on the table, continue having this kind of situation where Spain, once we launch any program, we have a public audience and we listen to everyone, civil society and enterprises, to do it well, to have the good experience from their side. I think we need to prioritize the financing, the good financing. That means the good growth, and good growth mean inclusive, sustainable, mean innovative. Innovation needs to be a pillar of the policies because we need to think about the future, not just the short run. And obviously, I think we need to be resilient. So in the case of Spain, I think we need to continue working in a way that when we think about energy policies, is ecological transition. That means it's more than energy, how we can work with energy in water, energy in people, energy in adaptation, energy and resilience ecosystems, circular economy, new materials, all those things needs to be together. And that's the way we are planning. We make energy transition compatible with the rest of the things that provide development. And I totally agree with Rana. I think when we think of this transition, there are three pillars that need to go together. That means that it's energy transition, it's climate, but it's industrial and economic sectors all together. It's the only way we can.
I think you're right. We need to get it all together. And we have to wrap up in just a moment. So I'll have our final word to you, Samir Valiyev, Deputy Minister of Energy. We really just have about a half a minute left. Can you tell me, from the viewpoint of Azerbaijan, as you're getting ready to host COP29, what is the one priority for Azerbaijan?
I think that the first priority for Azerbaijan in the energy transition is successfully implement models that will be feasible for both for business community and for government. And we are now successfully implementing PPP models, public-private partnership, and recently we have commissioned a new solar power station which has been implemented on the basis of this model, and this one is the biggest not only in the Caspian Sea region, but among CIS countries, former Soviet republics. So we'll go on this way and see, and we reach, hope we reach our targets.
Thank you so very much. Many thanks to my panelists today, Samir Valiyev, the Deputy Minister of Energy for the Republic of Azerbaijan, Sada Oasen, the Secretary of State for Energy for Spain, and Rana Adib, the Executive Director of REN21. Coming up, we're going to have a new BETD format. So right now, we have to do a little bit of changing on stage, and I'll invite Michaela Speth and Ellen von Sitzwitz to join me. But first, many thanks to my panelists.